My fiancé is a forensic psychiatrist who diagnosed me with a personality disorder during an argument, then sent the notes to my mother. I found the folder labeled subject, a longitudinal observations, while looking for a stamp. It wasn't hidden exactly. It was in a filing cabinet in his home office. The one he told me was for old case studies. The cabinet was locked, but he left the key on the hook by the garage door. The same hook where we hang our dog's leash. I didn't go in there looking for trouble. I was looking for our property tax statement because he said he'd filed it, and the deadline was yesterday. When I pulled open the drawer labeled Archive Confidential, I expected manila folders with barcodes and redacted patient names. Instead, I found a binder with a spine that read, a behavioral log. I pulled it out, and the first page was a color-coded calendar from 3 months ago. There was a key in the corner, yellow for emotional dysregulation, orange for withdrawn/protective, red for hostile confrontation. The first week of October was almost entirely orange. I remember that week. My father had been diagnosed with a fast-moving cancer, and I had spent most of my days on the phone with hospitals, trying to coordinate a transfer to a specialist 3 states away. I thought I was grieving. Apparently, he was observing. I'm 34, he's 41. We've been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. His name is Dr. Stephen. I'll call him Steve for the sake of the story, though that's not what he goes by. He prefers Dr. Cole, even at parties. He's a forensic psychiatrist. That means he doesn't just treat patients. He assesses them for the courts. He determines if someone is fit to stand trial, if they were insane at the time of the offense, if they pose a future danger. When we first met, I found his job fascinating. He told me stories, carefully sanitized, of course, about the way people's minds fracture under pressure. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he saw patterns the rest of us missed. My friends didn't. When I told them I was dating a forensic psychiatrist, they made jokes about him analyzing me. I laughed it off. I said, he's off the clock with me. I genuinely believed that. He was always so calm, so measured, so careful with his words. He never raised his voice. He never slammed a door. He would listen to me vent about work, nod slowly, and then say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling undervalued in that environment," which felt supportive at first. It felt like he was translating my chaos into something manageable. Lately, though, the calm has started to feel clinical. It started with small things. If I came home in a bad mood, he wouldn't ask, "Hey, what's wrong?" He would ask, "What's the primary emotion you're experiencing right now?" If I sighed too loudly while unloading the dishwasher, he would look up from his laptop and say, "That's the 3rd time you've sighed in the last 8 minutes. Is there something you want to communicate, or is this a somatic expression of internal distress?" I started to feel like I was being observed under glass. Then came the debriefings. After we had an argument, usually about something mundane like whose turn it was to pick up the dry cleaning, he would wait until the next morning when we were both calm, sit me down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and say, "Let's walk through yesterday evening. I want to understand the chain of events that led to your escalation." He had a notebook. He took notes. I told him it felt weird, like I was being interviewed. He said, "I'm just trying to build a communication model that works for us. Data doesn't lie." I thought he was being quirky. I thought it was his version of a relationship journal. Last month, I found out he had done a psychological risk assessment on my sister's new boyfriend. He didn't tell me. I found out because my sister called me, furious, saying that Steve had pulled her aside at a family barbecue and asked her if she knew that her boyfriend had a sealed juvenile record for cruelty to animals. I didn't know. I confronted Steve that night, and he looked genuinely confused as to why I was upset. He said, "He's going to be around our future children." I ran a basic background screening and looked at his social media patterns. I was being proactive. I told him he wasn't a detective. He was a psychiatrist, and it wasn't his job to evaluate my sister's love life. He said, "Once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. It's a professional liability to ignore them." That's when I started to get scared. The binder I found had sections. The first section was the color-coded calendar. The second section was titled Interpersonal Dynamics and contained printouts of text conversations between us, with handwritten annotations in the margins. One exchange where I said, "I'm fine, just tired," had a note next to it that read, "Denial of emotional state, possible masking, monitor for somatic complaints." Another exchange where I had sent him a laughing emoji after he'd made a dry joke had a note, response incongruent with previous conflict, suggesting either emotional lability or performative reconciliation. The third section was the one that made me put the binder down and walk outside to the porch to breathe. It was titled Risk Factors and Mitigation Strategies. It was a list. He had written bullet points about me. Family history of cancer, father. Potential for a complicated grief reaction. Monitor for withdrawal. Previous relationship ended with infidelity on partner's side. Possible trust deficits that may manifest as hypervigilance toward my schedule. Not currently pathological, but noted. Social circle includes 3 individuals with substance use history. Not current users, but environment of reduced inhibition. Factor for future decision-making. Strong attachment to autonomy. Likely to resist safety protocols regarding children. Preemptive counseling required. I sat on the porch for 20 minutes, staring at the dog running around the yard, trying to convince myself that this was just how his brain worked. He was a forensic psychiatrist. He categorized things. He was trying to understand me. Maybe this was his version of love, a deep, obsessive cataloging of my every trait. But then I got to the last page. It was a list of intervention strategies with a date from 3 days ago, the day before yesterday. It was the day I had told him I wanted to postpone the wedding. I hadn't decided to postpone the wedding. I had brought it up as a conversation. I said, "With everything going on with my dad's treatment, I feel like planning a September wedding is too much. Maybe we push it to next spring." He had been calm. He said, "That's a reasonable adjustment." We had a normal conversation. I went to bed feeling relieved that he was so understanding. According to his binder, he had written down a different interpretation. Under intervention strategies, he had listed, subject expressed desire to delay commitment following increased contact with family of origin, not uncommon. However, framing as postponement rather than cancellation indicates ambivalence, not certainty. Potential boundary testing. Need to reinforce consistency without appearing reactive. Recommend initiating structured conversations around financial interdependence to assess underlying motivation. If avoidance continues, consider requesting collateral information from her mother to contextualize relational patterns. I read that last bullet point 3 times. Requesting collateral information from her mother. He was going to call my mother to contextualize my relational patterns. He was going to interview my mother about me like I was a patient he was writing a court report on. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, until the sun came up. When he woke up and found me there, he didn't look worried. He looked curious. He stood in the doorway with his coffee mug and said, "You didn't come to bed. Did you have a parasomnia episode?" That's a clinical term for sleep disturbance. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He was asking for a data point. I told him I found the binder. I didn't yell. I was too tired to yell. I just pointed to the office and said, "The one in your filing cabinet." I saw it. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He walked over to the porch swing, sat down next to me, and said, "Okay, let's talk about it." I said, "You've been diagnosing me. You wrote that I have emotional dysregulation. You keep a color-coded chart of my moods. He said, I keep a log of observed behaviors. It's how I process information. I told you when we started dating that my professional training affects how I see the world. You said you understood. I said, I didn't understand that you were going to treat me like a forensic subject. You called my sister's boyfriend a risk factor. You wrote that my friends are environmental risks. You were going to call my mother without telling me. He set his coffee down and folded his hands. He used his calm voice, the one he probably uses with patients who are becoming agitated. I understand why this feels intrusive. I do. But you have to understand that in my field, we don't have the luxury of ignoring data because it's uncomfortable. I love you. That means I want to understand every variable that could impact our future. When we have children, I will need to know which environments are safe. I will need to know which family members have histories that could pose a risk. That's not control. That's informed decision-making. I asked him if he trusted me. He paused. He did that thing where he tilts his head slightly, like he's listening to a patient's response for a hidden meaning. Then he said, I trust the data. The data shows that you are a reliable person with strong pro-social values. But data can change. My job is to monitor for changes. I asked him what would happen if the data changed. What if I had a bad week? What if I got depressed because my dad was dying? What if I made a mistake? He said, then I would update the assessment, and we would work on a treatment plan. I asked him if he was my fiancé or my doctor. He said, I can be both. That was the moment I realized I couldn't be in that house anymore. I packed a bag. I told him I was going to stay with my sister. He asked me if I wanted him to call my father's oncologist to get an update on his prognosis, so I wouldn't have to carry the emotional burden alone. I told him no. I told him to stay away from my family's medical information. He nodded, wrote something down on a small notepad he pulled from his back pocket. I saw him do it and said, I'll give you space. But I want you to know that leaving during a period of heightened emotional distress without a structured communication plan is a pattern we've discussed before. I walked out the door. That was 3 days ago. I've been staying with my sister, who is still furious about the boyfriend background check, but has been surprisingly gentle with me. She asked me why I didn't leave sooner. I told her that it's hard to leave someone who never yells, never threatens, never breaks anything. How do you explain to people that your partner's love feels like a psychological evaluation? How do you say, he's not cruel, he just writes down my size? My mother called me yesterday. Steve had called her. He didn't do it behind my back. He called her while I was sitting at my sister's kitchen table, and then he texted me to let me know he had done it. His text said, spoke with your mother. Just wanted to get her perspective on how you're doing. She agrees that you've been under significant stress and that some of your recent decisions may be reactive. I'm not angry. I'm here when you want to talk structurally. I called my mother immediately. She was confused. She said he'd been very polite, very concerned. He'd asked her if she'd noticed any changes in my mood, any withdrawal from social activities, any uncharacteristic impulsivity. My mother, who has no idea what a forensic psychiatrist is beyond a fancy shrink, told him that yes, I'd seemed a little stressed lately, but that was normal given my father's illness. She thought he was just a worried fiancé checking in. She didn't know she was being used as a collateral source in his ongoing assessment of my mental state. I told her everything. The binder, the color-coded moods, the annotations on my text messages, the plan to preemptively counsel me about our future children. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that has been echoing in my head ever since. She said, "Honey, he's not trying to love you. He's trying to manage you. There's a difference. I know I need to end this engagement. I know that logically. But I'm struggling because I keep asking myself the same question. Is he wrong? Is he actually doing something malicious? Or is he doing the only thing he knows how to do? He's not a detective who interrogates suspects, but his entire professional existence is built on the premise that human behavior is a puzzle to be solved, that people are unreliable narrators of their own lives, that the truth is found in the patterns they don't even know they're showing. He told me once that he chose forensic psychiatry because he likes the clarity. Criminal court is messy, he said, but the mind follows rules. Even when it's breaking down, it follows rules. I think I fell in love with that clarity. I thought if I was with someone who could see the rules, I would be safe from the chaos of my own emotions. But I didn't realize that to him. I would become just another case file. Yesterday, I sent him a message asking for the engagement ring back. I told him I needed time to think, but I knew even as I typed it that I wasn't going to go back. He replied with a long voice memo. In it, he said he respected my need for space but wanted to flag a concern. He said that my sudden withdrawal after a period of increased family stress was textbook for an avoidant attachment response. He said he wasn't saying this to hurt me, but that if I ended the relationship now, without a structured closure process, I would likely repeat the pattern in future relationships. He said he hoped I would consider at least a few joint sessions with a neutral therapist to deconstruct the cognitive distortions that were leading me to interpret his care as control. He ended the voice memo by saying, I have a folder for you, A. I've had it since the first year we were together. It's not because I don't trust you. It's because you're the most important subject I've ever had. I don't want to lose my data set. My data set. That's what he called me. I haven't responded. I blocked his number for now, but I know he'll find another way to reach out. He's methodical. He's patient. He believes he's doing the right thing. And that's the part that terrifies me most, not the anger, not the threats, but the absolute clinical certainty that his way of loving is the only rational way to love. My sister wants me to file for a restraining order. I told her he hasn't threatened me. She said, he diagnosed you with personality disorder during an argument and sent the notes to your mother. That's a threat. It's just a threat wrapped in medical terminology. I'm going to see him tomorrow, in a public place, a coffee shop. He agreed to meet me to exchange the last of my things. I'm bringing my sister, and I'm bringing my own notebook, not to record his moods, but to remind myself that I get to write my own story. I don't need a forensic assessment to tell me what I already know. Love shouldn't feel like a diagnosis.